Flickering sunlight streamed through the oval windows of the first-class cabin, casting a golden glow on the meticulously arranged seats. The air hummed with quiet luxury, soft conversations, the faint clink of champagne glasses, and the occasional rustle of leather-bound menus. Among the privileged passengers was Jonathan Hale, a man whose tailored suit and polished demeanor spoke of success, though his eyes carried the sharp edge of pride. To him, life was a game of winners and losers, and he had long since crowned himself victorious. Beside him sat a man whose presence was unassuming yet magnetic. Dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, he gazed out of the window with a calm that seemed to transcend the cabin's opulence. His name was Keanu, though few recognized him here. To most, he was just another traveler. Yet, beneath the surface, he carried a quiet wisdom shaped by years of navigating fame with humility and a heart attuned to the struggles of others. The flight began with Jonathan dominating the space between them, his voice a steady stream of self-congratulation. He spoke of deals closed, markets conquered, and the virtues of ambition, his words laced with an air of superiority. Keanu listened without interruption, his expression serene, as though he were weighing each word not for its content but for what it revealed about the man speaking them. As the plane leveled above the clouds, a small disturbance rippled through the cabin. An elderly woman struggled with her seat's controls, her frail hands fumbling with unfamiliar technology. Without hesitation, Keanu rose to assist, his movements unhurried and his demeanor kind. The act was simple, yet it drew the attention of nearby passengers, who watched as he engaged her in gentle conversation, his warmth dissolving her frustration. Jonathan observed from his seat, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. As stories of Keanu's quiet generosity began to circulate among the passengers, Jonathan found himself confronted by a truth he had long ignored, that greatness was not measured by wealth or status, but by the depth of one's compassion. The world of Transglobal Flight 5721 was one of curated luxury, where the hum of jet engines blended with the soft glow of ambient lighting. The first-class cabin exuded refinement, polished mahogany surfaces, champagne flutes perched on side tables, and the faint aroma of leather mingling with freshly brewed coffee. Outside, the endless expanse of sky promised escape, yet within, the cabin became a crucible for transformation. Jonathan Hale, a man whose life revolved around power and prestige, carried an air of entitlement. His tailored suit and expensive watch were symbols of his success, yet his demeanor often alienated those around him. His motivation was simple, to dominate every space he entered, convinced that his wealth and intellect set him apart. Keanu Reeves, seated beside Jonathan, was a stark contrast. His unassuming presence and simple attire masked a life rich with quiet generosity and introspection. A man shaped by personal tragedies and profound resilience, Keanu sought connection over recognition, carrying an innate ability to see the humanity in everyone. His motivations were rooted in humility, driven by a desire to uplift others without seeking acknowledgement. Initially, Jonathan dismissed Keanu, perceiving him as an ordinary traveler unworthy of sharing the elite space. Yet, as the flight progressed, Keanu's actions, helping an elderly passenger, engaging in meaningful conversations, unveiled a depth of character that challenged Jonathan's worldview. Passengers gravitated toward Keanu, drawn by his warmth and the stories of his unseen kindness. Jonathan's initial arrogance gave way to introspection as he witnessed Keanu's effortless compassion. The stark contrast between their values forced him to confront his own superficiality. By the journey's end, the once divided travelers shared a quiet camaraderie, the cabin transformed into a space of shared humanity, where even the most unlikely connections could spark profound change. In the midst of first-class luxury, Jonathan Hale's arrogance collided with an unassuming man's quiet grace, only for him to later discover the stranger was Keanu Reeves, a beacon of humility and kindness. Witnessing Keanu's selfless acts, helping an elderly passenger and inspiring stories of anonymous generosity, Jonathan's pride unraveled, replaced by awe and regret. A simple handshake from Keanu bridged their divide, sparking a profound transformation in Jonathan, as the flight became a testament to the redemptive power of compassion and human connection. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as Jonathan Hale adjusted his cufflinks, his mind already racing through the upcoming merger he was spearheading. His goal was clear: to secure his position as the youngest senior partner at his firm. Yet, his confidence bordered on arrogance, and his disdain for those he deemed less ambitious was palpable. Across from him, Keanu Reeves quietly observed the cabin, his demeanor calm, his focus seemingly elsewhere. Keanu's goal, though unspoken, was to remain present, to connect with the world around him, even in the fleeting moments of a flight. Jonathan's first obstacle came in the form of his own ego. When the elderly woman nearby struggled with her luggage, Jonathan dismissed her plight, assuming the attendants would handle it. Keanu, however, stepped in without hesitation, lifting the bag with ease and offering a warm smile. This small act of kindness sparked murmurs among the passengers, some recognizing the actor, others simply moved by his humility. Jonathan, meanwhile, felt an unspoken challenge to his worldview, though he masked it with indifference. As the flight continued, their dynamic deepened. Keanu struck up conversations with passengers and crew alike, sharing stories that revealed his unassuming wisdom. Jonathan, initially disinterested, found himself drawn to the quiet authenticity of the man beside him. A subplot emerged as a young boy seated nearby, fascinated by Keanu, shyly approached. Keanu engaged him with genuine interest, encouraging the boy's dreams of becoming an artist. Jonathan watched, his own childhood aspirations, long buried beneath corporate ambition, stirring uncomfortably within him. The first-class cabin became a stage for subtle transformations. Jonathan's carefully curated persona began to crack as he observed Keanu's effortless ability to connect with others. When a sudden bout of turbulence caused a nervous passenger to panic, it was Keanu who calmed her with a steady voice and reassuring presence. Jonathan, for the first time, felt inadequate, not in wealth or status, but in his capacity to truly see and support others. The obstacle now was internal, a growing awareness of his own emotional distance. By the time the plane began its descent, Jonathan's goals had shifted. What began as a quest for professional dominance now seemed hollow in the face of Keanu's quiet strength. Their conversations, though brief, left Jonathan questioning his priorities. Keanu, sensing the change, offered no judgment, only a parting comment as they disembarked: "Sometimes, the hardest journeys are the ones inside us." These words lingered, setting Jonathan on a path not of career conquest, but of rediscovery and growth. The tranquility of the first-class cabin shattered when a sudden jolt rocked the plane, accompanied by a sharp, metallic groan. Gasps rippled through the passengers as the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing an unexpected mechanical issue requiring an emergency diversion. Tension hung thick in the air, and the once serene atmosphere dissolved into murmurs of fear and uncertainty. As the plane began its descent, an elderly man in the row ahead clutched his chest, his labored breaths signaling a medical emergency. The flight attendants scrambled, but no doctor was present. Without hesitation, Keanu sprang into action, offering calm reassurance and helping administer oxygen. His quiet leadership steadied the cabin, inspiring others to assist. Jonathan, initially paralyzed by the chaos, found himself drawn into the effort. At Keanu's urging, he held the man's hand, offering words of comfort. For the first time, Jonathan's polished veneer cracked, revealing a man unaccustomed to vulnerability yet moved by the gravity of the moment. As the plane landed safely, applause erupted, but Jonathan's applause was for something deeper, a newfound awareness of connection and purpose. Keanu's unassuming heroism had not just saved a life but also awakened Jonathan to the humanity he had long ignored. The hum of the engines provided a steady rhythm as the cabin settled into a tranquil lull. Across the aisle, a young mother struggled to calm her restless toddler, whose cries pierced the otherwise serene atmosphere. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, some sighing in irritation. Without hesitation, Keanu rose from his seat, crouching beside the frazzled woman. With a soft smile and a few playful gestures, he managed to distract the child, eliciting giggles that replaced tears. The mother's gratitude was evident, her whispered thank you carrying more weight than words could express. Meanwhile, a flight attendant approached Jonathan with a quiet request. A passenger in economy class had fallen ill, and the staff needed assistance relocating him to the more spacious first-class cabin. Initially reluctant, Jonathan hesitated, his instinct to decline clashing with the growing unease in his chest. Keanu's earlier actions lingered in his mind like a persistent echo. With a deep breath, he nodded, offering his seat and retreating to the back of the plane without complaint. As Jonathan settled into his new surroundings, he found himself seated beside a retired schoolteacher named Eleanor. Her eyes sparkled with wisdom, and her stories painted vivid pictures of decades spent nurturing young minds. She spoke of students who overcame insurmountable odds, their triumphs fueled by compassion and perseverance. Jonathan listened intently, her words stirring something long dormant within him, a yearning to contribute beyond the confines of his career. Back in first class, Keanu engaged the ill passenger in conversation, his calm demeanor easing the man's discomfort. Other travelers watched in quiet admiration, their initial indifference melting into a sense of collective care. The cabin, once a space of isolation and hierarchy, began to transform into a community bound by shared humanity. As the plane approached its destination, Jonathan returned to his original seat, his perspective irrevocably altered. He glanced at Keanu, who was now engrossed in a book, and felt an unfamiliar warmth, a connection not born of status but of shared understanding. The journey had reshaped him, leaving behind the fragments of arrogance and replacing them with the seeds of humility. The cabin's atmosphere shifted as turbulence jolted the plane, prompting gasps from passengers. The crew reassured everyone, but unease lingered. Jonathan, usually unfazed, tightened his grip on the armrest, his confidence cracking. Keanu noticed, his calm demeanor unshaken. First time feeling turbulence like this? Jonathan hesitated before nodding, his vulnerability exposed. Meanwhile, a subplot unfolded as a young mother struggled to calm her crying baby. The tension in the cabin grew as annoyed glances darted her way. Keanu, ever perceptive, offered to help, distracting the infant with a playful gesture. The mother's gratitude was palpable, and the passenger's irritation softened into quiet admiration. Jonathan observed these moments, the cracks in his ego widening. He recalled his dismissive remarks earlier, now glaringly hollow. The turbulence outside mirrored the storm within him, forcing him to confront a truth he'd long ignored. His wealth had insulated him from the raw, unpolished beauty of human connection. A sudden announcement heightened the stakes, a medical emergency in economy class. A passenger needed urgent assistance, and the crew called for volunteers. Keanu immediately rose, his actions unhesitating. Jonathan, caught between his instinct to remain seated and a budding sense of responsibility, reluctantly followed. Together, they moved toward the back of the plane, their stark differences now irrelevant. In the cramped aisle, Keanu's calm leadership shone as he helped stabilize the situation. Jonathan, though out of his depth, followed instructions, his arrogance melting into genuine effort. The experience was humbling, a stark reminder of life's fragility and the power of collective action. As they returned to their seats, Jonathan felt a shift within him, a quiet resolve to be better. Keanu, sensing the change, offered a knowing nod. The flight continued, but for Jonathan, it was no longer just a journey through the skies. It was the beginning of a transformation. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as Jonathan sat in uneasy silence, his earlier bravado now a distant echo. He replayed his words, their sharp edges cutting deeper with every passing moment. Across the aisle, a young boy nervously clutched a toy plane, his fear of flying evident. Without hesitation, Keanu leaned over, engaging the boy with a soft smile and a calming story about his own first flight. The boy's laughter soon replaced his anxiety, and Jonathan couldn't help but watch, struck by the actor's effortless ability to connect. Minutes later, turbulence jolted the plane, eliciting gasps from passengers. A flight attendant, visibly shaken, struggled to maintain composure. Keanu calmly stepped in, offering reassuring words and helping distribute water to ease the tension. His actions, devoid of ego, were a quiet testament to his character. Jonathan felt a pang of discomfort, realizing how far removed his own life had been from such selfless gestures. As the turbulence subsided, a passenger seated nearby shared a heartfelt story of how Keanu's anonymous generosity had saved her family from eviction years ago. The cabin fell into a reverent hush, the weight of her gratitude palpable. Jonathan's chest tightened, his self-image unraveling under the light of these revelations. He saw, for the first time, the stark contrast between his pursuit of wealth and the quiet richness of Keanu's humanity. Determined to bridge the chasm he had created, Jonathan leaned toward Keanu, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I misjudged you," he admitted, the words heavy with sincerity. Keanu met his gaze, his expression kind but unreadable, before offering a simple nod. It was a moment of unspoken understanding, a turning point that left Jonathan grappling with the possibility of change. As the plane began its descent, the cabin seemed transformed, the earlier tension replaced by a shared sense of connection. Jonathan, once consumed by his own importance, now felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar, humility. Keanu's presence had been a mirror, reflecting not just his flaws but the potential for growth. The lesson, though unexpected, had been profound. The hum of the engines provided a steady backdrop as the cabin settled into a rhythm of quiet conversation and occasional laughter. Jonathan, still grappling with the earlier exchange, found himself observing Keanu more closely. There was an ease to the actor's interactions, a genuine attentiveness that seemed to draw people in, as though each word spoken to him carried weight and value. It was a stark contrast to Jonathan's own approach to life, transactional, calculated, and often dismissive. A sudden jolt of turbulence interrupted the calm, prompting gasps and murmurs of concern. The captain's voice reassured the passengers, but the momentary unease lingered. Keanu, noticing a young boy clutching his armrest in fear, leaned over with a calming smile and began speaking softly to him. The boy's mother looked on, gratitude shining in her eyes, as Keanu's words seemed to dissolve the child's anxiety. Jonathan, watching this unfold, felt a pang of something unfamiliar, envy, perhaps, not of Keanu's fame, but of his ability to connect so effortlessly. He couldn't recall the last time he'd comforted someone without expecting something in return. This thought gnawed at him, forcing him to confront the emptiness beneath his polished exterior. As the turbulence subsided, a flight attendant approached Keanu with a whispered request. A passenger in economy class had fallen ill, and the crew was short-staffed. Without hesitation, Keanu rose, following her to the back of the plane. Jonathan, compelled by a mix of curiosity and guilt, trailed behind, unnoticed. What he witnessed left him speechless. Keanu knelt beside the ailing passenger, offering water and reassuring words. He even helped adjust the man's seat for comfort, his movements unhurried and sincere. The scene was a quiet testament to the kind of person Jonathan had long ceased to be. It was not grandeur or wealth that defined Keanu, it was the simple, unwavering choice to care. Returning to his seat, Jonathan felt the weight of his own shortcomings pressing down on him. He thought of his colleagues, his family, and the countless moments he'd chosen ambition over connection. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of a desire to change. As the plane began its descent, Jonathan turned to Keanu, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Thank you," he said, the words heavy with unspoken meaning. Keanu regarded him with a quiet smile, his eyes filled with understanding. "It's never too late," he replied, his tone as gentle as the clouds they descended through. As the flight cruised steadily above the clouds, turbulence struck with an unexpected ferocity, jolting passengers from their comfort. The cabin lights flickered, and a tense silence gripped the air. A frightened child began to cry, her mother struggling to calm her amidst the chaos. Jonathan, instinctively clutching his armrest, glanced at Keanu, who remained calm, his steady demeanor radiating reassurance. Without hesitation, Keanu leaned over, offering the child a kind word and a small gesture of comfort that seemed to ease her fears. The turbulence subsided, but the unease lingered. A sudden announcement from the captain revealed a medical emergency on board. A passenger and coach was unresponsive. The attendants scrambled for assistance, and without hesitation, Keanu volunteered to help. Jonathan, moved by the actor's selflessness, surprised himself by standing as well. Together, they navigated the narrow aisle, reaching the distressed passenger. Keanu's calm presence and Jonathan's unexpected willingness to assist created an unspoken partnership, bridging the gap between their once disparate worlds. As the crisis unfolded, Jonathan found himself following Keanu's lead, his arrogance dissolving with each act of compassion. The experience forced him to confront his own humanity, the fragility of life, and the importance of connection. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of responsibility not as a burden, but as a privilege to serve others. The passengers watched in quiet admiration, the cabin transformed into a collective of shared purpose. When the situation stabilized, Jonathan returned to his seat, his mind racing with newfound clarity. He glanced at Keanu, who offered a simple nod, as if acknowledging the silent transformation taking place. The investment banker, once consumed by ego, now felt a flicker of humility, a seed planted by the extraordinary kindness of a man who sought no recognition. As the plane descended toward its destination, the once divided passengers shared a collective sense of gratitude. Jonathan, now quieter and more introspective, turned to Keanu. "Thank you," he said, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken revelations. Keanu smiled warmly, his eyes reflecting an understanding far deeper than words could convey. As the plane began its descent, Jonathan Hale sat in silence, his once unshakable confidence replaced by an unfamiliar but welcome humility. Keanu's quiet example had dismantled his arrogance, leaving him with a newfound understanding of what true success meant: compassion, connection, and selflessness. It wasn't the wealth or power he had amassed, but the lives he could touch that would define his legacy. Before disembarking, Jonathan turned to Keanu, his voice steady but sincere. "Thank you. You've shown me what I've been missing." Keanu's smile was calm, his response simple. "Every day is a chance to start again." As the passengers exited, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. Conversations flowed freely, strangers now united by a shared sense of humanity. Jonathan, inspired by Keanu's example, resolved to use his resources not for personal gain but to uplift others. Let this story remind us, humility holds the power to transform, and kindness can ripple far beyond its origin. Today, choose empathy, extend a hand, listen, and make a difference. As the plane descended, Jonathan sat quietly, his once boisterous demeanor replaced by introspection. Keanu's humility had dismantled the walls of arrogance Jonathan had built around himself, leaving him face to face with the person he wanted to become. The cabin, once a stage for ego, had transformed into a crucible of change, where kindness and perspective forged a new path. Jonathan resolved to channel his success toward meaningful contributions, inspired by Keanu's quiet generosity. He vowed to listen more, judge less, and measure worth not by wealth, but by the impact of his actions. The lesson was simple yet profound: true greatness lies in service to others. As they disembarked, Keanu gave Jonathan a parting nod, a silent acknowledgement of his journey ahead. The world outside awaited, a canvas for redemption and growth. For Jonathan, this flight was more than a trip, it was the beginning of a transformation. Let us all remember, humility and compassion can elevate not just ourselves, but those around us. Who will you inspire today?